Once again, the mainstream press is furthering the idea that all ancient Europeans were dark-skinned brown people. This time, it's the German outlet Deutsche Welle, who's written an article entitled, "How Nazis Whitewashed a Prehistoric Shaman's Remains." The article is about how scientists have now determined that the ancient remains of a prehistoric European actually belonged to a woman of color. A powerful woman of color, mind you. As the outlet states, quote, "Nazis thought the grave belonged to a white man, but the 9,000-year-old human remains were of a powerful, dark-skinned woman. In prehistoric times, women weren't inferior to men. They received sumptuous burials and held important social and political positions. People who differed physically or psychologically from a perceived norm were not cast out, but could rise to important positions. 9,000 years ago, it might have been normal for a differently colored female who was physically different from the average person in her community to become a powerful spiritual or political leader." Unquote. Note that the press typically wants you to believe that ancient Europeans were all brown, but now Deutsche Welle's angle is that ancient Europeans accepted dark-skinned outsiders as spiritual leaders. These really are mutually exclusive concepts, yet Deutsche Welle doesn't seem to care, which is remarkable since a major accusation of the article is that the Nazis were blinded by ideological prejudice. To be clear, this was the Mesolithic period. There wasn't mass transit, meaning there was no avenue for such diversity. Again, Deutsche Welle somewhat implies that this woman was some kind of racial outsider. One piece of evidence they use is that the boy she was buried with wasn't, quote-unquote, closely related. However, even if he wasn't immediate family, he was most certainly ethnic kin. The only other two groups the Western hunter-gatherers could have possibly met during the Mesolithic period were Eastern hunter-gatherers and Scandinavian hunter-gatherers, both of whom share common ancestries with Western hunter-gatherers. And moreover, all the studies I've seen conclude that those two groups were light-skinned. The article really is just another piece in an increasingly disjointed mediatic narrative, and I think Thomas Rousel, aka Survive the Jive, described that narrative best in a recent Telegram post. Quote, "So far, if we believe mainstream media and certain online people, Western hunter-gatherers were black people of color. Early European farmers were Middle Eastern people of color. Western steppe herders were Middle Easterners who looked just like Indians for some reason. Mix these different people of color together, and you get white people who are not people of color, except that there is no such thing as white people. That is a racist construct invented in the modern era, but the designation people of color, which is defined by negation as those who are not white, is legitimate because of the historic injustices experienced by some people of color at the hands of some white people in recent centuries. Also, you can extend the term people of color all the way back to the Stone Age, but calling a person from the Iron Age white, even if they are identical to modern white people, is anachronistic and unscientific. Make sense to you?" Unquote. Now, it's probably not news to many of you watching that there is a massive campaign to rewrite the history of European peoples. But perhaps what some of you aren't aware of is that this whole idea of ancient Europeans being black probably didn't originate with the recent Cheddarmen controversy in 2018. In 2016, 2 whole years before a team from the Natural History Museum extracted DNA from Cheddarmen for their now infamous study, Ubisoft released a game called Far Cry Primal, which takes place in the early Mesolithic period in Central Europe, roughly 12,000 years ago. Its story centers on a hunter named Dakar, whose people, the Winja, are based on Western hunter-gatherers. Dakar's hunting party is wiped out by a saber-toothed tiger, and he then has to reunite with scattered members of his larger clan in the land of Oros, which is located within the Carpathian mountain range. Now, technically, the Winja are listed as Cro-Magnons, who are the ancestors of both Western hunter-gatherers and Eastern hunter-gatherers, but Cro-Magnons had already splintered into the aforementioned populations by 10,000 BC. Immediately what stands out is that none of the NPCs are white. In fact, many are modeled off sub-Saharan Africans, such as a shaman named Tensei, and a powerful female huntress named Jaima. Mesolithic Europe was a very harsh place. Women would not have been hunting large beasts. Many people in this period died from severe body trauma they received while hunting large beasts. Men evolved larger frames, denser bones, and more upper body strength for a reason, just as women evolved wider hips and breasts for a reason. Moreover, the Western hunter-gatherers most certainly did not look anything like sub-Saharan Africans. According to principal component analyses, they were as distinct from Africans as modern Europeans are. Now, while there are no living Western hunter-gatherers today, Estonians have the highest Western hunter-gatherer admixture. Somewhere around 40% of their ancestry traces directly to Western hunter-gatherers. And yet Estonians are some of the whitest people you will find on planet Earth. The game brings some other ancient European populations into the mix as well. The Azila, a fire-worshipping cult, are based off early European farmers who migrated into Europe from ancient Anatolia some 9,000 years ago. But of course, they're all depicted as brown too. The thing is, we have a very good idea of what these people actually looked like. Modern Sardinians trace about 95% of their ancestry to early European farmers, and yet they bear little resemblance to the Azila, whose matriarchal leader looks like yet another sub-Saharan African. And no, early European farmers did not have matriarchal societies. But perhaps the most blatantly out-of-place people in the game are the Udam. They're basically Neanderthals. The problem here is that Neanderthals ceased to exist as a distinct human subspecies some 30,000 years ago, long before the Mesolithic period. The game depicts Neanderthals as invaders from further up north who are going around eating the Winja people in order to cure themselves of some kind of brain disease that's killing them off. Now, I'm not aware of any evidence that Neanderthals were cannibals or that they went around eating Cro-Magnons. They also had been living all throughout Europe for several 100,000 years, long before any other humans arrived. When Far Cry Primal came out, the general public was pretty enthralled by its supposed historicity. All the NPCs spoke a reconstructed form of Proto-Indo-European, an ancient language from which most modern European languages derive. Now, while that was very cool, very neat stuff, the problem is that this language didn't exist yet in 10,000 BC. The earliest dating I've seen for the language is around 7,000 BC, but even the two linguists from Kentucky who came up with the Winja language stated themselves that Proto-Indo-European doesn't trace back any further than 4,500 BC. But even if it did exist in 10,000 BC, the language came from a population in the Pontic steppe that didn't expand into the Carpathian region until sometime around 4,000 BC. There's debate on the exact dates here, but the main point is that the Western hunter-gatherers didn't speak an Indo-European language. We actually have no idea what they spoke, although it might share common origins with the Basque language, spoken by the Basque people in Iberia today. Basque is not an Indo-European language and is generally thought to predate the arrival of Indo-Europeans. Now, of course, liberties must be taken at times with media in order to write a compelling, accessible narrative. You can't always be entirely accurate in storytelling, but that said, Far Cry Primal was pretty blatant modern propaganda that somehow managed to foreshadow a supposed scientific discovery. Remember, the famous Cheddarmen controversy was in 2018, a full 2 years after this game's release. Clearly, the media wants to rewrite the popular image of what Europe's past was, but as Thomas Rousel articulated in his post, these popular images leave white people virtually no origin story. If we didn't come from Europe, and none of our ancient ancestors were white, then where the hell did we come from?